Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dylan Swanson. I'm an agriculturist here at SMBSC, and today I'm going to bring you an update on Palmer Amaranth. This PowerPoint is in collaboration with Dr. Tom Peters, the Co-op Extension Sugar Beet agronomist from NDSU. All right, so I'll start with what is Palmer Amaranth. Palmer Amaranth is an annual broadleaf weed in the Amaranth genus. It's native only to the desert Southwest and is considered a weed throughout the rest of the country. These next few slides are from the MDA. I'm just going to have some comparisons and identification between Palmer and the weed we all know, which is water hemp. So when looking at a pigweed in the field, the first characteristic to look at is the petiole length. This step requires you to remove the leaf blade and petiole from the stem of the plant and pull the petiole against the base of the leaf blade. If the petiole is shorter than the leaf blade, pull another leaf from lower on the stem. If it is still shorter, then it is likely not Palmer Amaranth. The next characteristic would be is the plant area smooth. When looking at a pigweed in the field, the second step is to look for fine hairs. To do this, it is best to touch the leaf blade, petiole, and stem to determine if there are fine hairs. If there are fine hairs on the leaf, petiole, or stem, then it is not Palmer Amaranth. If there are no hairs, there is a possibility that it could be Palmer Amaranth. And then the final step is the inflorescence short or long. When looking at a pigweed in the field, the final characteristic is to look for the length of the inflorescence, how dense the individual flowers are, and the length and stiffness of the flower bracts. You can identify this with how prickly it is to touch. If the inflorescence is short, 3 to 8 inches typically, and individual flowers are not prickly to touch, then the plant is not likely to be Palmer Amaranth. However, if the inflorescence is long, 8 inches to several feet, and densely packed flowers are prickly to the touch, then the plant is likely to be Palmer Amaranth. And if you've gone through all these steps and you're still not sure, you can always consult Tom Peters and send him these samples as well, or a plant sample. The current status of Palmer Amaranth in Minnesota. MDA has investigated 94 sites in 22 counties since 2016. 34 of these sites have Palmer Amaranth plants. 60 sites had Palmer Amaranth introduced via seed, but no plants were established. The way they've managed these sites were very intensively. They surveyed each site and it resulted in hand pulling, continued by flame torching and prescribed fire to destroy the plant. Following that, herbicide tolerant crops were planted with appropriate herbicide applications. All sites of infestation and sources were investigated and pathways from Palmer Amaranth plants were identified. The MDA maintains a database with Palmer Amaranth fields. As you'll see, they find the source, they find the acres infested, and then however they're maintaining that and whether it's still detected. It will take 3 years with no Palmer Amaranth detection to be removed from this list. Now here's a distribution of North Dakota Department of Agriculture and Palmer Amaranth in their part of the world. So as you can see, color coordinated here, the blue is previously found but no longer detected. Counties will continue to be monitored. The green is found and still detected, but it's continuously managed still. And red is detected in 2022, but no longer found. Counties will be continued to be monitored. Of the counties in North Dakota, 19 of these have all had Palmer Amaranth identified or detected since 2018. So the question is, why the concern? There's other noxious weeds in the world. We all know about Canadian thistle. So here's the reality with Palmer Amaranth. It's very fast growing. It's a highly competitive weed. It has high water use efficiency, extended germination and emergence windows. It's a very prolific seed producer, and populations have developed resistance to multiple classes of herbicide with different modes of action. This next slide here is from Dr. Kevin Bradley from the University of Missouri, where he was comparing water hemp growth to Palmer Amaranth growth throughout the season. You see that water hemp can grow as much from 0.75 to 1.25 inches a day, whereas Palmer Amaranth can grow 1.1 to 2.5 inches a day, where it almost doubles the growth of water hemp. And eventually later in the season, by early September, you could potentially have 6-foot tall water hemp plants, or excuse me, 6-foot tall Palmer Amaranth plants in your field. Here's another chart comparing Palmer Amaranth to yield, because it grows so fast and it's a highly competitive plant. Access soybean yield loss. Dr. Dexter studied redwood pigweed quite intensively. Dr. Peters, his weed would have been water hemp. And now if this is our future pigweed, we can see how detrimental to yield loss it could be in the future. Water hemp and Palmer Amaranth are dioecious, meaning male and female flowers are on separate plants. Progeny from dioecious plants tend to be genetically diverse, such as herbicide resistance. 6 sites of action have all showed resistance to Palmer Amaranth. Of these the families are ALS inhibitors, which we know as Pursuit, Auxin Mimics, 2,4-D, photosystem 2 inhibitors, atrazine, EPS-PDS inhibitors, PowerMax3 or glyphosate, PPO inhibitors, Flexstar, and HPPD inhibitors, Callisto, all have shown resistance to Palmer Amaranth. So I have 2 scenarios here. This is the cost for herbicide programs when it comes down to controlling these weeds. Hypothetically, let's say you have no water hemp or Palmer Amaranth present on your farm. It's going to require likely a 2-pass program. Your post timing can be flexible, and your soil residual group 15 is not generally needed in the post program. So with no Palmer Amaranth present, you could expect $15 per acre on corn, $26 to $40 on soybean, and somewhere around $89 for a sugar beet herbicide application program. Now on the other side, let's say you do have water hemp and or Palmer Amaranth present on your farms. This would require a 3-pass program. Would recommend that more than 3 modes of action are used for your pre-application. Recommended that a group 15 is applied with a post program, and the sequential post may be needed in most years or situations. Require with Palmer Amaranth present $44 per acre in an application, 73 to 92 for soybeans, and then your sugar beet would end up being somewhere around $178 per acre. So this next slide, kind of a little bit going on here, quite a bit actually. There's several different pathways that Palmer Amaranth has shown its way to move around. Some of those include feed, bedding, and screenings, manure, buying and planting seeds, and machinery. All have shown ways of spreading around and throughout the United States. Pathways for introductions of Palmer Amaranth into Minnesota are identified sources as seed, which includes slender wheatgrass, buffalo grass, coastal millet, pearl millet, and Japanese millet. One of the bigger ones is going to be screenings from sunflowers. The spread of manure, which is sunflower screenings as a feed source, and feed, post-scratch chicken grains. So screening pathways. First infestation in an agriculture field or manure from local feedlots for sunflower screenings fed as roughage. Sunflower screenings were sampled and tested and found to be infested with Palmer Amaranth at a rate of 5 to 30 seeds per pound. Livestock producers selling manure immediately transitioned to other feed sources. Trucker that was hauling the screenings cooperated to sample and test loads to determine the frequency of the contamination. Cease and desist was issued to the company selling contaminated screenings into Minnesota. And then continued use of screenings as feed in neighboring states resulted in 1,000 acres of infested row crops with significant cost to control of $30,000. Screening pathway outcomes. The Minnesota Screenings Act prohibits prohibited noxious weed seeds and screenings used for feed. Encourage companies handling risky commodities to incinerate or compost these screenings. Manufacturers using screenings must be able to devitalize weed seeds and require screening permits and permit to transport. Devitalization requires heat. Grinding is not sufficient. Sunflower screenings are a very risky commodity. Here's another scenario where a manure pathway would be present. Palmer amaranth infestation in a cornfield. Cover crops were seeded, no-tilled, and non-traditional weed management. Manure was applied as fertilizer. To trace back the investigation, 14 seed lots, none of which were contaminated, but manure was likely the source. Why we should be concerned. There's lots of dairies in SMBSC and Mid-DAC growing areas. Standing alfalfa is expected to confirm it is Palmer amaranth free. Some alfalfa producing states do not consider Palmer amaranth a noxious weed. Manure, whether that's liquid or solid, tainted with Palmer amaranth, all has the potential to be distributed. So our commitment to you. By April 15, 2023, a strategy to protect the co-op with Palmer amaranth is discovered in an SMBSC sugar field. Best management practices for Palmer amaranth to control in sugar beet and continued research to identify solutions for its control in the future. It's better to have a plan early rather than have to deal with it later on. And call to action, continue to be curious, learn how to identify weeds, seek advice if a plant doesn't look right. Pathways will need to be managed to minimize the threats for farmers and land managers. Zero tolerance for Palmer amaranth in Minnesota. Call your agriculturalist if you suspect Palmer amaranth. Also, you can always call Tom Peters if you want to get a plant tested. That website on the bottom, it does not hurt to get familiar with it. It certainly helps. It never hurts to reach out and get a second opinion. And then in the back, you can see posters that kind of identify more of all the pigweed species. The similarity of these plants, both grown in a greenhouse. One is water hemp and the other is amaranth. Feel free to take a guess at which one's which. And with that, that's all I have. If you have questions for myself or Dr. Pierce, I'm sure he'd be willing to answer anything as well.